I haven't slept in 3 days. The doctors say it's PTSD, flashbacks from my time on the force mixing with sleep deprivation. But they don't understand. They can't understand. What happened during my night shift at the Biltmore Hotel wasn't some psychological break. It was real. All of it. And I need to get this down while I still can. While my hands are steady enough to type and my mind is clear enough to remember. Maybe it'll help someone else survive if they ever find themselves in my situation. Though honestly, I hope nobody ever does. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Mike Sullivan, ex-cop, 15 years on the force before everything went sideways. The funny thing about corruption is how it creeps up on you. Little compromises at first, looking the other way when your partner accepts a thank you from a grateful shop owner, staying quiet when evidence disappears from lockup. But then I uncovered something bigger, much bigger. Money, laundering through the department, evidence tampering, connections to organized crime that went all the way to the chief's office. I thought I was doing the right thing by gathering evidence. 15 years of building trust, of being one of the good ones, and I was ready to blow it all open. Instead, my own team turned against me. Suddenly, I was the dirty cop, the rat, the one who couldn't be trusted. They planted evidence in my locker, doctored body cam footage, erased recordings that would have proved my innocence. Forced resignation followed, along with divorce papers from Sarah. She said she couldn't handle the shame, couldn't face our friends anymore. 20 years of marriage ended with a signature and the slam of a door. These days, I waste away in a rundown Miami apartment that smells of mold and broken dreams. The walls are thin enough that I hear my neighbors fighting at night, their Spanish curses mixing with the endless drone of my police scanner. I keep it on out of habit, listening to my old beat, to the codes and calls that used to structure my life. Sometimes I catch myself checking the shadows, convinced someone or something is watching me. Paranoid? Maybe. But after what happened at the Biltmore, I'm not so sure anymore. Yesterday started like any other day in my new normal. I woke up around noon, head pounding from cheap whiskey, mouth tasting like I'd been chewing on cigarette butts. The sunlight stabbed through my cracked window like an accusation, illuminating the disaster my life had become. Empty bottles lined the windowsill, catching the light like stained glass in a forgotten church. The stack of unpaid bills on my coffee table had grown tall enough to cast its own shadow. I dragged myself to the kitchen, stepping over a pizza box that had been there long enough to become part of the landscape. The instant coffee tasted like ash, but it was better than nothing. My hands shook as I poured it. Withdrawal or fear, I couldn't tell anymore. I checked my phone. No messages. Sarah hadn't called in months. Not that I blamed her. The only recent calls were from bill collectors and my landlord, their voicemails piling up like dead leaves. I was on my third cigarette of the day, watching the smoke curl against the ceiling and wondering if the water stains had grown larger, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but something, instinct, fate, or just plain desperation made me answer. The voice on the other end was thin and reedy, like wind whistling through dead leaves. It reminded me of an old case, a body we'd found in an abandoned warehouse. The victim had been there for weeks, and when we moved him, the sound his dried skin made against the concrete. Mr. Michael Sullivan? The voice pulled me back to the present. This is Mr. Whitaker from the Biltmore Hotel. We have an immediate opening for a night security position. Your law enforcement background makes you an ideal candidate. I almost laughed. My law enforcement background was exactly why nobody would hire me. But before I could say anything, he continued. The position pays $3,000 per night. That stopped me cold. $3,000 for one night of security work had to be a scam. But Mr. Whitaker kept talking, his words slithering through my phone like smoke. We require someone with experience handling unusual situations. Someone who knows when to follow protocol and when to trust their instincts. Your record at the department, the real record, not the one they created, suggests you're exactly what we're looking for. That last bit stopped my breath. The real record? Nobody was supposed to know about that. All evidence of my investigation had been buried or destroyed. I should have asked questions, should have demanded explanations. But when you're down to your last few dollars and the landlord's threatening eviction, even the strangest job offer starts to look like salvation. I arrived at the Biltmore just before 10 p.m. The Miami heat had finally broken, replaced by an unseasonable chill that seemed to emanate from the building itself. The hotel loomed against the night sky like a tombstone, its faded Art Deco facade a testament to better days. From the outside, it reminded me of those old photos you see of the Titanic, something beautiful on the verge of disaster. No trespassing signs dotted the overgrown lawn, their edges curled and blackened as if they'd been burned. The front doors were solid oak, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. They opened silently at my touch, too silently for their apparent weight and age. The lobby hit me like a physical force, stale air thick with the smell of old books and something else. Something that reminded me of the evidence locker after a long summer power outage. Dust motes danced in the dim light, moving against the air currents in ways that made my eyes hurt if I looked too long. The grand staircase dominated the space, its marble steps worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, their light seeming to sink into the shadows rather than dispelling them. Somewhere in the distance, old pipes groaned like something in pain. A massive mirror hung above the reception desk, its gilt frame blackened with age. As I approached, I noticed something odd about my reflection, a slight delay, barely perceptible, like watching a video feed with minor lag. Before I could process this, a voice spoke behind me. "Mr. Sullivan." I spun around, one hand instinctively reaching for a gun I no longer carried. Mr. Whitaker matched his voice, tall and gaunt, with skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dim light. His suit looked like it belonged in a different century, perfectly pressed, but somehow wrong, like a funeral suit that had been buried with its owner. Even his pocket watch chain seemed off, the links moving too slowly when he walked, as if passing through something thicker than air. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, producing a wax-sealed envelope from his coat. The paper looked ancient, yellowed and brittle, but the red wax gleamed like fresh blood. "Though I suspect you'll find our security protocols somewhat different from your police experience." He held out the envelope. As I reached for it, our fingers brushed. His skin was cold. Not just cool, but the absolute absence of warmth, like touching dry ice. He held my gaze for a moment too long, his pupils expanding until they seemed to fill his entire eyes. "The rules are simple," he continued, "but absolute. Follow them without question, and you'll survive until morning. Break them." He left the sentence hanging, turned, and walked away. His footsteps made no sound against the marble floor, and the shadows seemed to bend around him as he disappeared down a darkened hallway. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of yellowed paper. The rules were typed in an old-style font, some letters misaligned as if hammered out on an ancient typewriter. The ink was an odd color, not quite black, more like dried blood that had oxidized over time. Each rule was simple, almost cryptic in its brevity. Rule 1. Acknowledge your reflection when it greets you. Rule 2. Room 303 remains sealed. Rule 3. Ignore all knocks between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Rule 4. Use only stairs after midnight, not the elevator. Rule 5. When lights flicker thrice, hide. Rule 6. Always leave a candle burning in the lobby. Rule 7. Do not speak to those who speak to you. Rule 8. Check the basement every hour. Rule 9. If the clock stops ticking, reset it immediately. If it shows a time that doesn't exist, leave the hotel before it reaches that time. Rule 10. When you leave the hotel at sunrise, never look back. I read them twice, trying to make sense of their cryptic nature. Each seemed to hint at some specific horror without actually describing it. My police training kicked in, and I found myself analyzing them like case notes, looking for patterns or hidden meanings. A sound pulled me from my thoughts, the soft click of heels on marble echoing from the second floor. I looked up to see a woman in a dark blue dress standing at the top of the stairs. She seemed oddly out of focus, like a photograph taken with a shaky hand. "Excuse me," she called down, her voice carrying an echo it shouldn't have in the space. "Could you help me find my room?" I seemed to have gotten turned around. The 6th rule flashed through my mind. Do not speak to those who speak to you. I kept my eyes on the stairs in front of her, deliberately avoiding her face. "The numbers are different here," she continued, her voice taking on an odd, hollow quality. "They keep changing when I look away. And the hallways, they're longer than they should be. So much longer." I busied myself with checking the front desk, ignoring her completely. The clicking of heels resumed, faster now, coming down the stairs. Each click seemed to get louder, more deliberate, until it sounded less like shoes on marble and more like bone hitting stone. When the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, I forced myself to look up. The woman was gone. But in the mirror behind the desk, I caught a glimpse of something moving. A figure in a blue dress, its face a blank expanse of skin with no features at all. My hand shook as I reached for my phone to check the time. 10:47 p.m. The night had barely begun. The next hour passed in a blur of routine tasks that felt anything but routine. I did what any good cop would do. Established a patrol route, noted exits and potential hazards, checked the security office. The office itself was a cramped room behind the front desk, filled with old CCTV monitors that showed grainy black and white feeds from around the hotel. Most of them worked, displaying empty hallways and silent rooms. But the basement camera... Something was wrong with that feed. The image seemed to pulse slightly, like a heartbeat. I tried to focus on the practical aspects of the job. It helped keep the fear at bay, gave me something concrete to hold on to as reality became increasingly fluid around me. But even simple tasks took on sinister overtones. The master keyring Mr. Whitaker had left felt too heavy, each key carved with symbols instead of numbers. When I tested them in different locks, they whispered against the mechanisms like secrets being told. Around 11:30 p.m., I was doing my 3rd floor patrol when I saw it. My first real proof that the rules weren't just some elaborate prank. The hallway stretched out before me, its faded red carpet seeming to absorb the light from the ancient wall sconces. As I passed a large mirror, something caught my eye. My reflection had stopped moving. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. In the mirror, My reflection stood perfectly still, head slightly tilted, watching me with an expression I'd never seen on my own face. A small smile played at its lips. Not my smile, but something older, colder. As I watched, it slowly raised its hand in greeting. The first rule echoed in my mind. Acknowledge your reflection when it greets you. "Good evening," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. The reflection's smile widened, showing too many teeth. It nodded, then resumed moving in sync with me. But now there was something subtly wrong with all my movements in the mirror, as if the reflection was leading rather than following, making decisions a split second before I did. I hurried away, but the experience had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. In my years on the force, I'd seen some terrible things. Aftermath of gang violence, domestic disputes gone wrong, bodies pulled from the bay after too long in the water. But nothing had prepared me for the quiet horror of watching my own reflection become something else. The night grew colder as it deepened. Around midnight, I found myself on the 3rd floor again, drawn there by a sound I couldn't quite identify. Something between a hum and a whisper. The hallway looked different now. The carpet pattern seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it, geometric shapes flowing into each other like liquid. That's when I noticed the door to room 303. It was different from the others, older, with strange markings carved into the wood. The brass numbers were tarnished almost black, but they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. As I watched, a thin line of what looked like water began seeping out from under the door. I took a step closer, then stopped. Rule 2. Room 303 remains sealed. But my police instincts were screaming at me. If there was water damage, I should investigate. If someone was in there. A sound came from behind the door, soft at first, like someone crying. Then it changed, became deeper, wetter. The crying transformed into laughter, but not human laughter. It reminded me of the sound a suspect had made once when we found him at a murder scene, covered in blood and completely disconnected from reality. The water kept flowing, but now I noticed it was too dark to be water, too thick. It smelled like copper and something else, something older and fouler. The laughter got louder, and underneath it, I heard something moving in the room, something heavy being dragged across the floor, getting closer to the door. I backed away, my shoes leaving prints in the dark liquid. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a sound like wet meat slapping against wood. Something heavy hit the other side of the door. The brass handle began to turn, slowly, degree by degree. I ran. Back in the lobby, I fought to catch my breath, my heart trying to pound its way out of my chest. The front desk clock read 12:17 a.m. I did a quick check of the hotel's systems. Lights, cameras, locks. Everything seemed normal, but normal had become a dangerously relative term. The basement camera feed caught my attention again. The image was clearer now, showing long rows of old storage shelves and what looked like abandoned furniture covered in sheets. As I watched, one of the sheets moved, just slightly, just enough to make me doubt my own eyes. Then a shadow passed in front of the camera, too fast to make out clearly, but definitely humanoid in shape. I checked the rules again. Check the basement hourly. Write down any movements. With shaking hands, I noted the time and activity in the security log. The paper felt wrong under my fingers, too smooth, almost organic. The ink seemed to sink into it like it was being absorbed rather than drying. A noise from the lobby made me look up. The main chandelier was swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. The crystals chimed against each other, creating a discordant melody that made my teeth ache. Then the lights flickered once, twice. I knew what was coming. Rule 5. When lights flicker thrice, hide. The third flicker plunged the lobby into darkness. In the silence that followed, I heard it. A wet, sliding sound coming from the direction of the grand staircase. Something was moving in the dark, something big. The sound got closer, accompanied by a smell that took me back to my worst crime scenes. Decay and chemicals and something else. Something that didn't belong in this world. I ducked behind the front desk, making myself as small as possible. The sliding sound reached the lobby, followed by a noise like dozens of bones cracking at once. Through a gap in the desk, I caught a glimpse of something moving across the floor, a mass of shifting shadows that seemed to have too many limbs, all moving in different directions. It paused near the desk, and I heard a sound like someone trying to breathe through a throat full of mud. The thing in the lobby moved past my hiding spot, each movement accompanied by that wet, sliding sound. I stayed perfectly still, not even daring to breathe. Years of police work had taught me how to handle dangerous situations, but nothing in my training covered whatever this was. The darkness seemed alive, pressing against my skin like cold, wet velvet. Finally, the lights flickered back on. The lobby was empty, but changed. All the furniture had been rearranged, every piece now facing the front desk where I'd been hiding. Water dripped from the chandelier, though when I later checked, the crystals were completely dry. My hands shook as I checked the time. 1:03 a.m. Less than halfway through my shift. The lobby clock showed the same time, but something was off about its movement. The second hand didn't tick. It flowed, like liquid mercury sliding around the clock face. I needed to move, to shake off the paralysis of fear. The elevator dinged invitingly, its polished brass doors sliding open with a smooth whisper. My legs ached from crouching behind the desk, and the thought of climbing more stairs made my knees throb. But Rule 4 was clear. Use only stairs after midnight. As I turned toward the stairwell, I heard it, a soft humming coming from the open elevator. It sounded like an old lullaby, the kind mothers sing to their children. Sarah used to hum something similar when she couldn't sleep, on those nights when the job followed me home, when the nightmares. The humming grew louder, more enticing. Just one ride wouldn't hurt, right? My feet moved of their own accord, drawn to that soothing sound. I was 3 steps from the elevator when a scream erupted from inside. Not the sound of someone in fear or pain, but something impossible, like metal tearing itself apart. The doors slammed shut with enough force to shake the walls, followed by the sound of the elevator plummeting down, 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 far longer than the building's actual height should allow. The basement camera feed pulled my attention back to the security office. The image had changed. The storage room was now filled with people, all standing perfectly still, facing away from the camera. Their clothes spanned different eras, from modern business suits to garments that looked centuries old. As I watched, they all turned simultaneously, revealing blank spaces where their faces should be. I scrambled to write down the time and shut off the monitor, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. That's when the knocking started. At first it was so faint, I thought I was imagining it. A gentle tapping at the front door like raindrops on glass. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. exactly. Rule 3 flashed through my mind. Ignore all knocks between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. The tapping grew stronger, more insistent. Then came the voice. Sarah's voice, perfect in every detail. "Mike? Mike, please, I know you're in there. Something's following me. Please, baby, let me in." My heart clenched. The desperation in her voice was exactly like that night 5 years ago when a suspect had followed her home from the courthouse. I'd arrived just in time then, but now. "Please, Mike, I can hear it coming closer. Don't let it get me." I dug my nails into my palms, using the pain to stay focused. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But God, it sounded so much like her. The knocking became pounding, the doors shaking in their frames. Sarah's voice was joined by others. My former partner begging for backup, my mother calling me home, my father's voice, dead 10 years now, asking why I'd failed him. Each voice knew exactly what to say, which emotional strings to pull. Then they all stopped at once, replaced by a single voice that spoke in a wet, bubbling whisper. "We know what you did, Michael Sullivan. We know about the evidence you destroyed before going to internal affairs. We know about the witness you convinced to stay quiet. Such a righteous man, aren't you? Such a crusader for justice. But we know what you really are. Nobody knew about that. I'd never told anyone, not even Sarah." The voice was right. Before going to IA, I'd destroyed evidence of minor infractions, convinced a witness to change their statement about a fellow officer's misconduct. I'd told myself it was to protect good cops from bureaucratic oversight, but really, I'd been just as compromised as everyone else. The pounding resumed, harder now, the wood of the door starting to splinter. Through the cracks, I caught glimpses of something moving outside, shapes that shifted and flowed, too many limbs moving in impossible ways. The air grew thick with the smell of rot and copper and old pennies. I backed away from the door, bumping into something solid. Spinning around, I found myself face to face with a woman in an elegant 1920s dress. Her skin was gray, her eyes milky white, and her mouth stretched too wide, filled with row upon row of needle-like teeth. "Would you like to dance?" she asked, her voice echoing as if coming from somewhere far beneath the hotel. The ballroom is always open to new guests. Rule 7 hammered in my mind. Do not speak to those who speak to you. I kept my eyes down, refusing to engage with the woman in the 1920s dress. She moved closer, the fabric of her dress rustling like dead leaves. The temperature dropped so rapidly I could see my breath, forming strange patterns in the air that looked almost like writing. "Everyone dances eventually," she whispered, her voice now coming from behind me despite her standing in front. "Some just need more persuasion." I forced myself to walk away, keeping my steps measured despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Behind me, her laughter echoed off the walls, multiplying until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound followed me down the hallway, growing distorted, transforming into something that reminded me of a case I'd worked. A record player found at a murder scene, playing backwards at half speed. The basement camera feed drew me back to the security office like a magnet. The monitors cast a sickly blue glow over everything, making the shadows in the corners seem deeper, more alive. The storage room was empty again, but something was different. All the sheet-covered furniture had been arranged into a circle, and in the center. I leaned closer, my nose almost touching the screen. In the center of the circle was a figure in a police uniform, standing with its back to the camera. My old uniform. The figure's head began to turn, rotating much further than a human neck should allow. Just before its face came into view, I remembered Rule 8 and quickly switched off the monitor, my heart thundering in my chest. The time on my watch read 3:13 a.m. But when I glanced at the lobby clock, the numbers made my vision blur. 13:13. I blinked hard. Sure, I was seeing things. But the impossible time remained, the clock's hands moving in subtle jerks that seemed to deny the very nature of time itself. Something was very wrong. More wrong than usual, I mean. The air had become thick, almost syrupy, and each breath felt like drowning. The shadows in the corners of the lobby were growing, spreading like spilled ink across the marble floor. And the candle, the lobby candle, had gone out. Rule 6 hit me like a physical blow. The lobby candle must not die. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my lighter. The shadows were definitely moving now, flowing across the floor and up the walls like dark water. The temperature plummeted, and I heard that wet sliding sound again, closer this time, accompanied by the crack and pop of too many joints, moving in wrong directions. The lighter wouldn't catch. I could feel them now, the things in the darkness, their cold breath on the back of my neck. Whispers filled the air, speaking in languages that human tongues were never meant to form. Something brushed against my leg, something wet and cold that left burning trails on my skin through my pants. "Come on, you piece of shit," I muttered, fighting with the lighter. The darkness was almost complete now, the only illumination coming from the lobby clock's face, which now displayed a series of numbers that made my eyes hurt to look at. Behind me, something massive shifted its weight. I could sense its presence like a black hole, pulling at my spine. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to face whatever horror was lurking there. But somehow, I knew that if I did, if I took my eyes off that candle for even a second, I would never leave this place. Finally, the lighter caught. The wick ignited, and warm light flooded the lobby. The whispers ceased instantly, and the presence behind me vanished. But when I did turn around, I saw that every piece of furniture in the lobby had been rearranged to face my position. The upholstery was wet, as if something had been dripping on it, but the liquid evaporated even as I watched. The lobby clock now read 4:45 a.m. Dawn was approaching, but I knew the worst was yet to come. The rules had proven themselves real, terrifyingly, undeniably real, and I still had to survive another hour, had to make it to sunrise without breaking that final, cryptic rule. Dawn brings escape, if you don't look back. The hotel seemed to sense my thoughts. The whispers started again, but differently now. They spoke of escape, of freedom, of returning to my normal life. They promised answers about the corruption I'd uncovered, evidence that would clear my name. All I had to do was look back when I left. Just one glance. That's all it would take. I checked the basement camera one last time. The feed showed the storage room, normal at first glance. But as I watched, the sheets covering the furniture began to move, rising and falling, like something was breathing beneath them. One sheet slipped, revealing not furniture but what looked like a human form, twisted and distorted as if viewed through warped glass. The last hour was the worst. The hotel seemed to come alive around me, as if the building itself was waking up. The walls pulsed subtly, like something enormous breathing. Dark liquid seeped from between the marble tiles, forming patterns that looked almost like words before dissolving away. The air grew thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something sweet and metallic that reminded me of the time we found that serial killer's workshop. the drain in the center of the floor still fresh with. No. Focus. I couldn't let my mind wander down those dark paths. Not now. 5:15 a.m. The first hints of dawn should have been visible through the lobby windows, but the darkness outside seemed absolute, as if the hotel existed in its own pocket of endless night. The candle's flame danced wildly, casting shadows that moved independent of the light source. They crept along the walls like living things, forming shapes that hurt my eyes to look at. Faces screaming in agony, bodies contorted in impossible ways. I heard footsteps on the grand staircase, slow, deliberate steps that sounded wrong somehow. Looking up, I saw my old partner, Dave, descending the stairs. He looked exactly as he had the last time I saw him alive, before he ate his gun after the corruption scandal broke. His uniform was pristine, but his head was wrong, tilted at an angle that made my stomach turn. "Hey, Mike," he said, his voice gurgling through the ruin of his throat. "Remember what you said at my funeral? About how you wished you could have saved me? Well, here's your chance. Just stay. Stay with us." I backed away, keeping my eyes on the lobby clock. The hands were moving backwards now, spinning faster and faster until they became a blur. The temperature dropped so rapidly that frost formed on the mirrors, creating patterns that looked like screaming faces. Then she appeared. Sarah, wearing the same blue dress she'd worn the day she left. But her movements were wrong, jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. "Mike, baby," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "I understand now. I was wrong to leave. We can start over. Just look at me. Really look at me." More figures emerged from the shadows. My father, still wearing his hospital gown from the day he died. My mother, her face frozen in the expression of shock she'd worn when she found him. Suspects I'd arrested. Victims I'd failed to save. Witnesses whose lives I'd ruined. They formed a circle around me, their voices mixing into a cacophony of pleas and accusations. The lobby candle flickered dangerously. I rushed to light another and another, creating a barrier of light around me. The figures retreated from the flames, but their voices grew louder. They knew things. Secrets I'd never told anyone. Thoughts I'd never voiced aloud. They spoke of the evidence I'd destroyed before going to internal affairs. The witnesses I'd pressured to change their statements. The small compromises that had started me down the path to my own downfall. 5:45 a.m. The clock faces throughout the lobby began showing different times, some moving forward, others backward, some displaying numbers that couldn't exist. The mirrors rippled like disturbed water, reflecting versions of the lobby that weren't quite right, some empty and decrepit, others filled with elegant parties from different eras, still others showing scenes of unspeakable horror. I heard the thing from the hallway again, its wet, sliding sound coming closer. The woman in the 1920s dress reappeared, still asking me to dance. Room 3. O3's door had somehow relocated to the lobby, dark liquid pooling beneath it. The knocking started again, more desperate than before. Through it all, one thought kept me sane. Dawn brings escape, if you don't look back. Finally, impossibly, real light began to creep through the windows. The figures grew more frantic, their movements more erratic. They begged, threatened, pleaded. They promised answers, redemption, peace. The walls themselves seemed to groan, and I heard something vast and ancient stirring in the depths of the hotel. 6:01 a.m. The first true ray of sunrise cut through the lobby like a blade, dispelling shadows that had seemed solid moments before. This was my chance. I walked to the front doors, my legs shaking but my stride purposeful. The voices grew more desperate, using every trick they knew to make me turn around. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Mike, please, don't leave me here alone." My father. "Son, after all these years, you won't even look at me?" Dave's gurgling laugh. "Running away again, partner? Like you ran when they came for me?" I pushed through the doors, stepping into the cool morning air. The voices followed, growing louder, more hysterical. Something cold brushed against my neck. Heavy footsteps approached from behind, accompanied by that wet, sliding sound. The hotel itself seemed to be calling me back, but I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I made it to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I drove away, I finally allowed myself a glance in the rearview mirror. The Biltmore stood silent and dark, showing no sign of the horrors I'd witnessed. Just another abandoned building waiting for its next victim. That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since then. Can't sleep. Because every time I close my eyes, I see that thing in the hallway, those dead-eyed guests, my own reflection smirking at me. The rules are still in my pocket. I've tried to destroy them, but every morning they're back. The typewritten text slightly different each time. Sometimes, when I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, my reflection moves just a fraction of a second too late. Or maybe I'm the one moving too late now. I honestly can't tell anymore. The worst part? I'm starting to notice things about my apartment. The shadows seem deeper than before. The walls pulse slightly when I'm not looking directly at them. And sometimes, late at night, I hear knocking at my door. I don't know what's happening to me, but I do know one thing. I'm never going back to the Biltmore Hotel, unless I already looked back, unless I never really left at all. God help me. I think I hear footsteps in the hallway, and they sound wet.